Welcome back to Midas Defense. I'm your host, Joe Punzler. A few weeks ago, we had Andy Weber on the show to talk about non-proliferation, about getting bad things off the battlefield and removing the weapons we all wish we could uninvent. But what happens when you have to operate within those shadows? Today, we're sitting down with someone who spent his entire career in that world of clandestine services. My guest is Ralph Goff, a 35-year veteran of the Central Intelligence Agency and a 6-time station chief. He's an old-school Russia expert whose career spans from the heights of the Cold War to the War on Terror and now into the modern era of great power competition. Lately, Ralph has been traveling back and forth to Ukraine, looking at the raw ground truth of the shifting global landscape. We had an incredible, wide-ranging conversation on the show, and today we're pulled from 4 of the most vital segments from that briefing. We're going to look at why this war isn't just a historic turf battle, the dark economic reality of who's actually volunteering to fight for Putin, and how autonomous drone swarms are creating a steampunk battlefield the West.
That is not a regional border dispute. That is a global battle between freedom and authoritarianism. And Ralph Goff, a man who spent 35 years inside the CIA, is telling you this directly. Now here is what they are not telling you on Fox News. Putin was not provoked by NATO expansion. That is a myth. Ralph Goff says it himself. It had nothing to do with NATO. What Putin feared was the idea of freedom spreading. He watched Ukraine choosing the West, choosing democracy, choosing the European Union, and he knew, if that succeeded, his own people would demand the same. That threat to his personal power was the real trigger. Now let us talk about the cost. Russia is losing close to 35,000 soldiers killed or seriously wounded every single month. Think about what that number means. The Soviet
and the Ukraine war fits in the middle of this. The war in Ukraine is not just a war between 2 nation states, Russia and Ukraine. This is a war between 2 competing value systems. And you see it you look at who's lined up on the sides, right? On Ukraine's side, you have more or less the U.S., you have Europe, right? You have the Western democracies. On the Russian side, you've got North Korea, Iran, right? China lurking in the background, right? These are all autocratic nations. So the real reason is, here you had Ukraine, which has millions of Russian speakers, right? It's a Slavic country. They're very closely related to the Russians. They aren't the same as the Russians. Putin would have us believe they're all one people. Pretty bizarre way of showing your respect for your own people by killing them. But, he watched as Ukraine started to reorient itself to the West, right? Economically, they want to join the EU. Politically, they want to join the EU, right? Militarily, yes, they did want NATO. They wanted NATO membership because, they were afraid of Russia. But, here was a country beginning to orient itself to the West, has millions of Russian speakers in it. And what Putin feared most was having a democratic, free, Western-oriented
Union lost approximately 15,000 soldiers over 10 years in Afghanistan. Putin is burning through that many in just 1 month. According to open-source casualty tracking by organizations like the Kyiv Independent and the BBC Russia Service, verified Russian military losses have been staggering and accelerating through 2024 and into 2025. And yet, the war continues, because Putin has found a way to keep feeding the machine. And where those soldiers are coming from, that is the part of the story that should make your blood run cold. Look at this chart. These are not numbers from Ukrainian propaganda. These are compiled from open-source data, satellite imagery, Russian obituaries, regional news reports. Independent researchers have been tracking this, and the trend is one direction only, up. Putin is not winning, he is bleeding. But the question is, can he bleed long enough to outlast Western support? And that is where your government's decisions matter enormously. I want you to really sit with what Ralph Goff just said. He is a 35...
Yes, the nature of warfare is changing, right? And Russia and Ukraine are fighting a type of warfare that's never been fought before, right? They are the pioneers in this, and both sides are learning. Both sides are trying to figure this thing out. I don't even think they know where this is really going, right? With this, it remains to be seen where we go with all this, semi-autonomy and autonomy that's of drones and drone swarms, right? There are big arguments now, even within the command structures of both sides, right? And on the Ukrainian side, you've got kind of a split between the old style military guys with tanks and artillery and conventional infantry, right? And then you got these new guys with their drones, right? For instance, Minister Fyodorov, the relatively new defense minister of Ukraine. Before this, he was the minister of digital transformation, right? So this is a guy.
Oh, wow.
He's all in on drones. He's all in on drones. Then you have General Syrskyi, the commander in chief of the ground forces or the defense forces of Ukraine, and he's a tanks and artillery guy, right? So these guys are kind of butting heads over, what do we do with these tanks and artillery? And this is where the U.S. comes in. We're not ready for this yet, right? The West is not ready for this new type of warfare that's coming of, drones and drone swarms. And, for instance, I'll give you an example. When I went out to Ukraine last month and, I tend to go in through Poland. It's easier that way. And I was landing, my commercial flight landed down in Krakow, beautiful city in southern Poland. And like many, airports in Eastern Europe, this one has the civilian side is on one side with the terminal and all that, and the other side is the military base. And as we're taxiing down the runway to go over to the civilian side, we pass all these Polish military aircraft that were there on the airbase side. And, the airmen were out there servicing the aircraft. Some were getting ready for flight and all right, guys are doing maintenance. And I'm looking at these and I close my eyes for a minute. And I just imagine what would happen if all of a sudden there was a surprise attack by drones, right?
Yeah.
And I could just see all these aircraft in smoldering piles of debris because there was nothing to protect them. And that kind of, for me, is where the West is right now, right? We're not ready for this new type of warfare.
It's a chilling realization. A multi-million-dollar jet fighter is wiped out.
5-year CIA veteran, he has seen wars up close on every continent. And when he landed in Poland and looked at those military aircraft sitting on that runway, he felt fear. Not because of Russian missiles, because of a $500 drone. A $500 drone could wipe out a multi-million-dollar fighter jet. And he says the West is simply not ready for that reality. I believe this is one of the most important warnings any intelligence professional has issued publicly in years. Here is what this means for you. The United States military budget in 2025 is approximately $850 billion. That is your tax money. And according to this CIA veteran, we are spending it preparing for the last war, not the next one. The Department of Defense has acknowledged the drone gap in its own reports, but acknowledgement is not action. Ukraine figured this out the hard way, and they are now teaching the world. The question is whether Washington is paying attention. And frankly, based on what Ralph Goff is describing, the answer right now is no. Every American should be demanding that their elected representatives ask one question in every defense hearing. Are we ready for drone warfare? Because if the answer is still no, that is a $500 problem with a $1 trillion consequence. Defense analysts have been ringing this alarm for 2 years. Ukraine is not just fighting Russia. Ukraine is inventing modern warfare in real time, with drones that cost less than a used car taking out tanks that cost millions. The lessons from that battlefield are priceless, but only if we are willing to learn them. And right now, the debate in Washington is still stuck in Cold War thinking. That has to change, and it has to change fast. There it is.
So, unfortunately, the scorecards are muddled because the administration keeps changing its position as to why we went to war in the first place, right? Regime change, not regime change. Prevent acquisition of a nuclear weapon. Now we're going to negotiate that. Are we back to the old JCPOA days, right? So there's a lack of clarity on what the real essential objectives of this military operation were. And when you're basing troops in a region, one of the things that allows you to have troops based in a region is you have some sort of strategic cohesion with your allies and your hosts.
Right.
And I see that fraying, and that is a danger in the future that it will fray further and will have a negative impact on the ability of the United States to project power in that region.
Yeah, we've been kicked out of places before. Clark Air Force Base, Keflavik is another one.
A 35-year CIA veteran, not a Democrat, not a Republican, a professional intelligence officer. And he just told you on the record that the Trump administration does not have a clear strategy in the Iran war. Regime change, then not regime change, nuclear weapons. Then let us negotiate. He said it himself. The scorecard is muddled. And here is why that matters, not just as a political talking point, but as a matter of life and death. When you send young American men and women into a war zone, they deserve to know why they are there. They deserve a clear mission, a clear objective, a clear definition of what victory looks like. Right now, according to this CIA insider, they do not have that, and our allies in the region are noticing. Ralph Goff warned that our strategic relationships in the Middle East are fraying. We have been pushed out of bases before. Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, Keflavik in Iceland. It can happen again, and when it does, America's ability to protect its interests in that region shrinks dramatically. Meanwhile, back at the gas pump, you are still paying 50 to 70 cents more per gallon than you were before this conflict started. Ralph Goff told us directly he does not think those prices ever fully come back down. The Iranians know that. They are using your pain at the pump as a weapon, and this administration, without a clear strategy, is letting them. Here is the bottom line. This is not about being anti-military. Our military performed magnificently. This is about demanding that the people in charge, the civilians who order our troops into harm's way, have a plan, have clarity, have a strategy. Right now, one of the most respected voices in American intelligence is saying they do not. That should outrage every single American, regardless of party. If this video opened your eyes, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is just getting started. And I cover it every single day. Don't miss what's coming next.